Have you ever noticed how sometimes the very people who should value us the most are the ones who try to erase us? It's a painful paradox. Family, which should mean support, can turn into a stage of betrayal and humiliation. That's exactly what I went through. On the day my daughter turned 30, instead of feeling part of the celebration, I realized she was trying to hide me from the guests. And life has a strange way of working, because the more people try to push us behind the curtains, the sooner reality itself drags us back into the spotlight. I know many watching this right now have already felt disrespected within their own families, treated like a burden, invisible, voiceless. It's a kind of pain that doesn't show on the outside, but it wounds the soul. But what happened that night revealed something no one expected. And before I continue this story, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel, because every comment is proof that dignity doesn't have an expiration date, and every subscription is a reminder that respect inside a family isn't a luxury, it's a right. My daughter Olivia's birthday should have been a joyful milestone. 30 years of life aren't just numbers, they're chapters filled with memories, choices, and paths traveled. I walked into that banquet hall expecting to be part of this celebration. After all, more than a guest, I was her father, the man who had been behind the scenes of every one of her achievements. But the moment I crossed the door, I noticed something was off. There was no chair reserved on the family's side for me. Instead, there was a lonely table, pushed back against the curtains, as if I was someone who had to be present, but invisible to everyone else. The first thing that washed over me was humiliation. It's strange when your own family tries to reduce you to a background character in your own story. It's not like being criticized by a stranger or overlooked at work. It's deeper, harsher. What should have been a family celebration became, for me, a portrait of silent betrayal. I didn't need everyone to clap for me or see my name printed in gold letters on the invitation. I just wanted to be treated with respect. Because respect inside family relationships isn't luxury, it's a basic right. But that night, I realized my daughter no longer saw it that way. As I adjusted myself in that faraway chair, I couldn't help but notice the painful contrast. Parents of other guests were being called to the center of the hall, showered with hugs, toasts, words of recognition. Me, I was tucked away, like a weight someone carries out of obligation but doesn't want to display. It's a feeling few understand until they live it themselves. When you sacrifice so much for someone, only to be treated like excess baggage. The emotion that overtook me was hard to describe. It was a mixture of indignation, sadness, and a growing sense of revolt. I remember thinking, is this the value of the education I tried to pass on? For more than 30 years, I taught in public schools, defending the idea that dignity isn't measured by your bank account, but by how you carry yourself through life. How many times had I told Olivia that knowledge was the one inheritance no one could ever steal? And ironically, there I was, the forgotten teacher, the one she preferred to hide. The public humiliation was real, but the deepest betrayal was intimate. The denial of our history, our bond, everything that once united us. And have you ever noticed that the most painful betrayal doesn't come from enemies, but from inside the family itself? That's what I thought as I watched the lights bounce off the crystal glasses. The guests knew nothing, but I knew. Every sip of champagne was mixed with the bitter taste of my exclusion. When someone you love tries to hide you, the pain isn't just social, it's existential. It's as if they were saying, you don't deserve to be remembered, don't deserve to be seen. And the question echoed inside me. If even my daughter doesn't acknowledge me, who will? But sitting there in that cold, misplaced chair, I began to feel something different. Humiliation, when truly understood, can become the seed of the most silent and transformative revenge. I don't mean petty revenge, the kind that trades pain for pain. I'm talking about the kind of revenge that looks a lot like liberation, the decision not to accept being diminished anymore, to find within yourself a dignity no one can take away. Deep down, I knew that scene was only the beginning of something bigger. Life has its ironies. It exposes us to ridicule only to prepare us for a turnaround no one expects. While the music played and the toasts echoed through the hall, my mind replayed scenes of my own life like a movie. I remembered the sleepless nights, grading papers, the simple meals I put together just to afford Olivia's college tuition. I remembered the night she lay on my lap, begging me to tell her stories about kings and revolutions, and I wondered, how could a bond built with so much affection turn into such indifference? That's when you realize education, no matter how solid, doesn't guarantee gratitude. And that hurts, but it also teaches. And if you'll allow me one piece of advice, it's this. Never let someone else's gaze define your worth, not even someone from your own family. If they try to put you behind the curtains, remember that your dignity doesn't fit into reserved seats. It's in your story, in what you built, in what you stand for. Humiliation may try to steal your voice, but it can also become fuel for something much greater. And that night, as I sat in the shadows, a thought began to grow silently inside me. Sooner or later, everyone in that room would have to see me. My name is David Parker. For more than 35 years, I taught history in a public high school. To many, that may sound modest, even ordinary. But to me, it was a choice filled with dignity. I never chased big fortunes, nor did I collect luxurious possessions. What I collected were books, experiences, and the conviction that the greatest inheritance a father can leave is education. Not just formal education, but the kind that shapes character, values, and vision of the world. That was the wealth I tried to hand down to my daughter, Olivia. On my limited salary, I learned to make choices most people never noticed. While colleagues bought new cars, I drove the same old sedan that had been on the road for over 15 years. While many traveled to Europe during vacations, I sat on the porch with a weathered book, letting the night breeze be my one luxury. Some called it a poor man's life. I never saw it that way. I saw it as a life with purpose, because every penny saved, every personal sacrifice was a seed I planted in my daughter's future. It may sound strange, but often family doesn't realize the weight of sacrifice until it's too late. Olivia studied at a private university, and the tuition alone consumed almost my entire paycheck. How many times did I give up a decent dinner just to cover her bus fare? How many times did I postpone replacing a refrigerator that barely worked because what mattered most was her textbooks? That wasn't humiliation, it was choice, and each choice was made with emotion because there was love behind it. The greatest betrayal is when a sacrifice made out of love is later treated as if it meant nothing. I remember entire nights spent grading papers alone, while Olivia slept in the room next door, dreaming of her future. I'd look at those scribbled pages and think, everything I do here is so she'll never have to choose between knowledge and survival. And yet, life has a way of surprising us. What should generate gratitude often produces forgetfulness. That's one of the hardest truths about family relationships. Effort isn't always recognized. That can wound us, but it can also set us free. And freedom, in this case, is understanding that we give out of love, not applause. Being a teacher also taught me that dignity isn't measured in money, but in legacy. Many of my students don't remember the exact historical dates I drilled into them, but they remember the lesson on respect I gave when I called out the boy who laughed at a classmate for not having brand-name sneakers. That's the power of education. It doesn't just shape minds, it shapes character. And that's what I tried to bring into my own home. Maybe I believed too much that values pass naturally from one generation to the next. That example always speaks louder than words. But life showed me that isn't always the case. Here's something I want you to take with you. When you sacrifice for your family, you have to be clear that sacrifice is an investment, not a guarantee. It's like planting a tree. You can water it, fertilize it, protect it, but you can't force it to bear fruit on your timeline. That's true for children, grandchildren, any family bond. And if I can give you one piece of advice, never expect immediate recognition. Do it because you believe in it. And if the fruit never comes, understand this: the value was never in the return, but in the giving. That mindset saves you from deep bitterness. Of course, philosophy aside, there's still the human side that feels. I too asked myself, did I do the right thing sacrificing so much? Should I have lived a little more for myself? Those questions haunt any parent who puts family above personal desires. But in the end, I realized the real revenge against ingratitude isn't to become bitter. It's to keep honoring the values that sustain us. Humiliation hurts, but it cannot erase decades of love, sacrifice, and dignity. And it's exactly at that breaking point that something greater often begins to take shape. Because life has a curious way of revealing the worth of our sacrifices in the most unexpected moments. What once seemed invisible suddenly becomes undeniable proof, like a hidden flame that, at the right time, bursts into light for everyone to see. At that birthday party, I didn't know it yet, but the seed of everything I had planted was about to bloom in a way no one in that room could ignore. When Olivia married Mark Sullivan, I truly tried to believe it would be the start of a new chapter of happiness for her. Every father wishes for his daughter to build stability, family, a life with someone who respects her. I didn't expect perfection, but I expected at least consideration. Yet from the very first handshake, I sensed something different. Mark didn't hide the disdain in his eyes, the way he looked at me, silently judging. To him, I was just an old public school teacher, a man who never learned how to make money or take advantage of life's opportunities. That look hurt me, not so much for what he thought of me, but for the fear that my own daughter might start seeing me the same way. Time proved my fear wasn't unfounded. With each family gathering, Olivia seemed to drift further from the roots that had carried her. She, who once proudly told my classroom stories, now laughed awkwardly whenever I mentioned my profession around Mark's friends. It was as if education, once my greatest legacy, had become a source of embarrassment. That shift tore at me. I wanted to be understanding, but how do you accept that what you built with love has become a cause of shame for your own daughter? That's a brutal truth about family. Sometimes when someone is absorbed into a different social circle, the original values dissolve. Little by little, Olivia immersed herself in Mark's world of luxury, expensive dinners, international trips, designer clothes. Nothing wrong with that. I myself always taught that life is meant to be enjoyed. The problem is when luxury becomes the ruler by which dignity is measured, and that's exactly what happened. Surrounded by so much glitter, I became the unwanted shadow. The father who sacrificed decades for his daughter's education was reduced in her eyes and her husband's to a simple old man who didn't belong in their display case of success. The betrayal in this context wasn't in harsh words, but in silence, and it's silence that weighs heavier than insults. Silence when I shared a classroom anecdote. Silence when I explained a historical fact at the dinner table. Silence, followed by sidelong glances, as if they were apologizing for me to their guests. That's a form of humiliation that leaves no visible scars, but it eats you from the inside out. It's like being told, he talks, but it doesn't matter. And maybe you've felt something like that yourself, being in a room where your presence isn't denied, but your voice is invisible. Here's a reflection I carry with me. When family puts us in that place of quiet shame, we have two options. The first is to shrink back, accept the role they've given us, and stay silent so we don't disturb anyone. The second is to understand that dignity is non-negotiable, and that even in silence we can stand firm. I remember a fellow teacher once called a failure because he had never published books or traveled abroad. He simply smiled and replied, "Failure is having money, but no one who remembers what you taught them." That phrase stayed with me, because dignity doesn't need applause, it needs consistency. Still, the emotion I felt as I watched my daughter reflect her husband's contempt was difficult to bear. The respect a father expects from his child isn't vanity, it's a silent pact of gratitude. I didn't want Olivia to idolize me. I just wanted her not to forget where she came from. But the closer she got to Mark's world, the more she seemed ashamed of the roots she shared with me. That, to me, was a form of silent betrayal. And with every gesture, I felt my presence was a discomfort, not because of who I was, but because of what I reminded her of. I was a living reminder of a simple life she wanted to erase. It's strange how life tests our patience. I, a man used to teaching generations about empires and revolutions, suddenly found myself living my own private war. Every subtle comment from Mark was like a disguised provocation. He didn't need to humiliate me with direct words. It was enough to treat me as if I were invisible. And the worst part was watching Olivia not only accept it, but repeat it. That's how humiliation within a family multiplies, not through open aggression, but through the repetition of small indifferences. Indifferences that, when stacked together, build a wall between a father and his daughter. And here's a lesson you might carry with you. Never let someone else's standards define the value of your life. If you are someone who worked hard, who sacrificed, who built with honesty, don't allow the contemptuous glance of another to make you smaller. Because those who see only luxury but can't recognize dignity have already lost the essence. Revenge, in these cases, doesn't need to be loud. It happens when life itself takes charge of exposing in public the truth that pride tried to hide. And believe me, life always finds a way to reveal the truth. The embarrassment I endured with Olivia's new family became, in a way, a turning point. It showed me that I no longer needed their approval to exist. But it also taught me that freedom begins when we stop expecting recognition from people who refuse to see us. Still, deep inside, something was burning. It wasn't hatred. It was a mix of sadness and a seed of decision. Because as a teacher and as a father, I knew no story ends in the chapter of humiliation. There is always a next chapter, and in it, things often turn upside down in surprising ways. At Olivia's birthday party, the ballroom was filled with laughter, clinking glasses and polished speeches. I watched from a distance, trying to convince myself that the coldness of the environment was nothing more than a clash of worlds, but it was during one of the toasts that I noticed the true sign of betrayal, not a material one, but a betrayal of memory, of affection, of the very bond between father and daughter. One of the guests, laughing loudly, asked casually, "And your dad, is he here tonight?" Olivia adjusted her dress, flashed a rehearsed smile, and answered without hesitation, "Oh, my dad, he prefers to stay quiet. He doesn't like these kinds of things." Those words fell on me like invisible stones. I was not the kind of man who avoided celebrations. I wasn't the one who preferred the shadows. The truth was, she preferred me hidden, as if my presence was too inconvenient to reveal. The betrayal was in the subtext. I wasn't only being pushed to the margins physically, I was being erased in her narrative. She hadn't just hidden me behind the curtains, she had hidden me from her story. The most painful part wasn't the comment itself, it was the ease with which she said it. No emotion, no hesitation. As if it were normal to erase a father's presence in front of dozens of people. That was public humiliation in its cruelest form. When the one who should value you the most chooses to deny your importance. It was as if the story I had built with sacrifice had been rewritten in seconds, while a room full of people laughed, unaware of what it meant for me. Family betrayals rarely come with shouts or scandals. They come wrapped in subtle phrases, spoken lightly, but carrying the weight of years of ingratitude. It's like when a child looks at their mother and says, "This isn't worth anything anymore," referring to something she fought hard to obtain. It's not about the object itself, it's about what it represents. Olivia's comment wasn't just about me not liking parties. It was about not being worthy of standing as part of her family. It was the denial of an entire history. In that moment, I remembered something from years earlier in my classroom. A student, when asked about his father, replied, "He doesn't do anything, he just works as a construction worker." That cut me deeply, because I realized how the dignity of hard work can be erased by careless words. Later, I pulled the boy aside and told him, "Your father builds homes that shelter entire families. Without him, many people wouldn't have a place to live. If that's not important, then what is?" The boy never forgot that. And at that party, I realized my own daughter had fallen into the same trap, to belittle the very roots that sustained her. That sign of betrayal opened a silent wound. While everyone toasted, I wondered, how can a daughter forget the nights she ran into my arms, asking me to tell her stories? How can she ignore that without the sacrifices of a poorly paid teacher? She might never have set foot in the private university where she met the people now shaping her life. That humiliation wasn't mine alone. It was hers too, though. She didn't realize it, because erasing her father was erasing part of herself. And it was in that instant that an idea began to take shape inside me. Not the idea of petty revenge, but of something greater, something that blended justice with liberation. Because I knew something no one in that room knew. Months earlier, I had received an unexpected inheritance, a property valued at over $1 million. And in silence, I had already made my decision about what to do with it. While Olivia was, hiding me, I understood that sooner or later, life itself would expose the truth. And here's another lesson for you. When someone tries to erase you, you don't need to scream to be seen. The greatest response to humiliation isn't fury, it's serenity. Because those who carry dignity inside themselves don't need to prove anything in that moment. It's like a flame kept hidden. It may look small, but when the right time comes, it lights up the entire room. I stayed silent that night, swallowing the pain and embarrassment, but inside me grew the certainty that this would not be the last chapter of the story. The party went on with music and laughter, but for me, everything had changed. Olivia's betrayal wasn't just social, it was existential, and it made me reflect. How many times do we, without realizing, also diminish the people who gave us everything? How many times do we treat as details those who were the very foundation of our lives? It's a painful exercise, but a necessary one, because every family bond deserves to be revisited under the light of respect. And when that respect is broken, what rises within us isn't just pain, it's also a strange force of transformation. I didn't say a word at that moment. I didn't raise my voice, didn't confront Olivia. I simply stored her comment like a marked page in an important book, because I knew the moment would come when that wound would turn into revelation. And when that moment arrived, no curtain would be able to hide me. After Olivia's comment, I didn't say a word. I just sat in silence, looking around like someone watching a play in which he no longer felt part of the cast. The ballroom glowed with golden lights. Guests laughed loudly. Glasses clinked. But for me, every sound seemed distant, muffled. All I could hear was the echo of her words. My dad prefers to stay quiet. He doesn't like these things. It was like a hammer, reminding me every second of the humiliation of being erased by my own daughter. While everyone else enjoyed themselves, my mind drifted back in time. I closed my eyes for a moment and returned to simple but powerful memories. I remembered sleepless nights grading papers at the kitchen table, a cup of cold coffee at my side. Olivia, still a child in her pajamas, eyes heavy with sleep, would wander in asking me to tell her a bedtime story, and I always stopped everything. I closed the notebooks and opened a worn-out book where kingdoms, battles, and heroes came to life in my voice. To her, I was the narrator of a magical world. To me, she was the reason behind every sacrifice. The contrast between those memories and the reality of that ballroom cut through me like an invisible knife. How could a bond built on so many details of love and care be rewritten with looks of contempt? That is the cruelty of family betrayal. It doesn't just erase moments, it erases meaning. That party showed me that Olivia no longer remembered the father who gave up everything so she could have the best. What seemed to matter now was Mark's approval and the gaze of his friends from her new world. I thought, how many of us have gone through this? You give everything, time, money, energy, love, and in the end, someone from your own family treats you like a burden. That humiliation hurts more than any rejection from strangers, because when it comes from an outsider, you can walk away. But when it comes from the very person you raised, taught, and protected, the wound is far deeper. And it's in that wound that a dilemma is born. Either you become a prisoner of the pain, or you turn that pain into liberation. In that silence, I realized something important. I might have been hurt, but I wasn't defeated. My dignity couldn't be measured by the way my daughter treated me at a party. It lived in what I had built over a lifetime. And that was the moment revenge began to take on a new meaning for me. It wasn't about giving back humiliation in equal measure. It was about proving to myself, before anyone else, that respect doesn't need to be asked for. It can be shown. As the waiter passed by, offering more champagne, I remembered the times when Olivia needed expensive textbooks, and I sold part of my own collection to buy hers. That, to me, was always the essence of education, giving more than you have, in the hope that the seed will bloom. I believed it would bloom into gratitude, but instead, it grew into vanity. As painful as that reflection was, it also brought me clarity. Not every seed we plant produces the fruit we expect, but that doesn't mean the tree itself has lost its value. And here's a piece of advice you might find useful. Never condition your dignity to someone else's recognition, not even your family's. Of course, it hurts not to receive respect from those you love, but dignity is something that cannot be outsourced. It's born inside, not outside. Want a practical example? If you give your best at work and no one acknowledges it, don't get stuck in the pain. Use it as fuel to keep growing. Read books that strengthen your mindset. I recommend Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, which teaches us not to let other people's judgments steal our peace. As everyone toasted, I watched Olivia smiling with her friends, unaware I was observing from afar. And I thought, would she ever remember who had truly stood by her side when nothing in life looked glamorous? That thought didn't come with anger, but with a kind of serene sadness. Because deep down, every betrayal inside a family carries a lesson. Sometimes we only value the foundation when we finally feel its absence. And that absence, sooner or later, always comes. I stayed quiet, reflecting, because I knew it wasn't time to act. Some battles are not won with impulse, but with patience. I could feel life was preparing me for something greater, and that party was only the opening scene. I remained in my corner, not to hide, but to observe. Because when you observe in silence, you see far more than those who never stop talking. And in that silence, I began to understand that humiliation, as painful as it is, can also be the beginning of an unexpected turning point. What no one at that party knew was this. Months earlier, life had surprised me in a way that changed everything. An old friend from my college days, Henry Collins, a cultured, solitary man, had passed away. He had no close family, and in his will he left me something I never expected, a property valued at over $1 million. It was his way of thanking me for a friendship that lasted decades, marked by conversations, support, and above all, respect. At first, I didn't know how to react. It was a fortune I never could have built on a teacher's salary. For weeks, I wrestled with what to do. Use it for myself, sell it, donate it, invest it. But after much reflection, I made a decision I still consider the most symbolic of my life. I transferred the property directly into the name of my granddaughter, Lily, Olivia's daughter. I did it quietly, with no announcement, without waiting for applause. because I knew dignity doesn't need a stage, it needs consistency. And here's the turning point. While Olivia was hiding me at that party, trying to turn me into a shadow, I had already lit up her daughter's future. That contrast moved me deeply. It was as if life had prepared an antidote for betrayal. The humiliation of being forgotten as a father collided with the certainty that, as a grandfather, I had already secured an unquestionable legacy. That freed me of a burden. I realized I no longer had to fight for immediate recognition, because actions speak louder than any speech. Think about it. How many times is the most powerful revenge not made of screams, but of silent proof? While Olivia smiled at her guests, trying to keep me hidden in the shadows, I carried in my pocket the key to a truth no one there suspected. The property in Lily's name was more than an asset. It was a symbol that education, respect, and dignity always find a way to bloom, even when others try to suffocate them. The emotion I felt in that moment was indescribable. Sadness for the present, but hope for the future. I reflected on life's irony. Olivia, swayed by Mark's arrogance and obsession with luxury, tried to erase me, thinking I was too small. But without knowing it, I already held something that could completely change how she saw me. And if there's one lesson in that, it's this. Never underestimate someone because of their modest appearance or simple position. Often, the greatest wealth is kept in silence, and when it comes to light, it shatters every mask. That discovery brought me an inner liberation. And I don't mean just financial freedom, but a state of mind. Until then, a part of me still craved my daughter's approval. But after registering the property in Lily's name, I realized I no longer needed it. My true commitment wasn't to Olivia's ego, it was to my granddaughter's future. And if you'll allow me a piece of advice, when you plant your legacy, always think of the next generations, because children may fail to recognize your worth, but grandchildren inherit the silent value of their grandparents. And notice how education shows itself even in this. I didn't just want to leave Lily material wealth, I wanted to leave her an example. One day, when she understands the story behind that property, she'll realize that the grandfather her mother tried to hide was the same man who secured her safety. That's the kind of lesson no school can teach, but it shapes character. Because family isn't only made of shared blood, it's made of choices that reveal either respect or betrayal. And I chose, even while wounded, to let respect prevail. While the laughter filled the hall, and Olivia worked hard to appear perfect in everyone else's eyes, I felt peace with my decision. Inside me, revenge had already begun, though no one knew it. Not cruel revenge, but just revenge. A mix of emotion and serenity, because sooner or later, the truth always comes out, and when it does, no one can claim it was chance. It is life itself proving that a man's dignity cannot be erased with a look of contempt, but only reaffirmed through concrete actions. That was the moment of my inner turning point. I realized I was no longer a victim. I was the protagonist. The betrayal and humiliation of being sidelined at that party no longer defined me. What defined me was the serenity of knowing I'd already written a future that no one could erase. And that awareness is one of the greatest forms of freedom, realizing that your value doesn't depend on the stage where others place you, but on the seeds you plant in silence. Sitting there in my corner, with a faint smile hidden on my lips, I thought, the moment will come when everyone will know the truth. And when it came, no curtain would be strong enough to hide me. Because life always prepares an unexpected scene to reveal who truly deserves respect. The night moved on, and I stayed in my corner, observing every detail as if reading a book in silence. The ballroom glowed, music echoed, guests enjoyed themselves. But inside me, something was shifting. With every smile Olivia gave her friends, with every gesture Mark made flaunting his superiority, I felt a heavy weight turning into clarity. I knew I could no longer remain in silence. The signal had been given. The time had come to decide how to respond to betrayal, to humiliation, to being erased. That's when they called everyone for the official photo, a symbolic moment planned to immortalize the night. Still seated, I watched the movement, guests lining up, Olivia adjusting her expensive dress, Mark pulling some people toward the center. Then Olivia walked toward me. She placed her hand on my arm and, in a low voice, said, "Dad, stay here. You don't need to be in it. It's just for close family." Close family, those two. Words cut through my chest like a cold blade. I, who had raised her alone after her mother left us too soon, wasn't considered close family. I, who had set aside personal dreams to finance hers, wasn't worthy of appearing in a photo meant to record the history of our family. That was the breaking point. At that moment, I realized it was time to turn silence into action. And here's a reflection for you. In life, we all face decisive moments. Moments where we have two clear choices: accept humiliation and retreat, or lift our heads and reaffirm our dignity. It's not about empty pride. It's about respect. The respect that every family bond should carry as its foundation. If you've ever been in a situation where someone tried to diminish you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A fire lights up inside, demanding justice, demanding that you prove your worth. I took a deep breath. I remember the exact sensation, my heart racing, my hand steady, but my spirit calm. From the inside pocket of my jacket, I pulled out an envelope I had been carrying since the day I finalized the inheritance papers. I hadn't planned to reveal it that night, but I realized that life, with its usual irony, had prepared the perfect stage. That was the moment, not to shout, not to humiliate, but to show, in front of everyone, that the father they had treated as invisible had far more to offer than they ever imagined. And that's how life works. The moment of true revenge isn't always planned, but often triggered by the arrogance of those who try to reduce us. Olivia wanted to keep me out of the photo, to reinforce the narrative that I wasn't part of the close family. But in trying to exclude me, she opened the door for me to reveal the truth. Betrayal becomes opportunity if we have the courage to act. And that's what separates those who are freed from those who remain imprisoned by pain. I walked to the center of the hall. All eyes turned to me, some surprised, others annoyed. I handed the envelope to the photographer and asked him to read it aloud. It was one of those moments when time seems to slow down. The chatter stopped, and silence took over. The photographer opened the envelope and announced, "The deed to a property valued at over $1 million had already been registered in the name of Lily Parker, my granddaughter." The reactions were instant. Murmurs, gasps, whispers spreading like fire. I, who seconds before was invisible, now stood at the center of the stage. Not because I asked for it, but because life placed me there. Olivia looked at me in disbelief, pale, while Mark seemed to lose the very ground beneath his arrogance. That was the price of betrayal. Discovering that the simple man, the teacher they tried to erase, carried not only dignity, but also the power to change destinies. And here's the lesson. Never underestimate someone you think is ordinary. Simplicity can hide wealth, and I don't just mean money. It can mean the wealth of character, of experience, of wisdom. How many times do we look down on someone, not knowing that person carries something that will one day make all the difference? The decisive moment is exactly this: to show, not with arrogance, but with serenity, that no one can steal the value of a life lived with respect. As silence filled the hall, I realized it wasn't only me who had made a decision. Life itself had made one too. The decision to reveal, in front of everyone who truly deserved, to be in that close family photo. And standing there, head held high, I knew this was only the first scene of a reversal that was still to come. The silence that filled the ballroom after the deed was read was so intense it felt as if even the musicians had forgotten their melody. Every eye turned to me, the man who just seconds earlier had been nothing more than a shadow in the corner of the room. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to accuse anyone. All it took was an envelope. A truth revealed in public, for the betrayal and humiliation I had endured to be transformed into silent revenge. A revenge that didn't wound, but liberated. The reaction was immediate. Some guests began whispering to each other. Others, who had barely acknowledged me before, now looked at me with genuine respect. I saw glances of admiration, surprise, even shame, because deep down, everyone understood that old teacher Olivia had tried to hide was the same man who had secured his granddaughter's future with a quiet, grand gesture. No speech was needed. The education I had carried my whole life spoke louder than any words could. Olivia looked as though she had been struck by lightning. Pale, she stared at me, unable to form a single word. It was as if the mask she had been wearing shattered before everyone's eyes. Mark, standing beside her, lowered his head, unable to keep up his usual arrogance. And in that instant, I understood the true power of public reversal. It isn't you who delivers revenge. Life itself takes charge of showing who really carries dignity. Liberation didn't come from humiliating my daughter, but from showing that respect cannot be hidden behind curtains. And here's something worth reflecting on. How many times do we feel tempted to lash out in anger when we're humiliated? But real strength doesn't lie in the immediate reaction. It lies in the patience that allows truth to surface at the right time. Revenge, when driven by pure emotion, can destroy, but when guided by serenity and dignity, it builds. That night, I didn't need to shout to reclaim my place. The simple act of revealing a document spoke louder than any fiery speech could. The impact was even greater because it was so unexpected. No one present could deny what was before their eyes. A father who had sacrificed his life for his daughter's education, now also securing the future of his granddaughter. The gesture exposed not only Olivia's ingratitude, but also the contrast between appearance and essence. While she tried to hide me to preserve an image of luxury, I revealed a concrete act of love, filled with emotion and dignity. That's what I call public reversal, when life itself transforms betrayal into living proof of respect. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time: freedom. The humiliation that had followed me since I stepped into that hall seemed to dissolve into smoke. I no longer needed anyone's approval because the truth was right there in front of everyone. That is a priceless lesson. Freedom begins the moment we stop waiting for recognition and start living according to what we know is right. Teaching had taught me that. The classroom had taught me that. And now life itself confirmed it. And as I stood there, watching the collective shock, I thought, this is how life surprises us. One moment, you're treated as invisible. The next, you're impossible to ignore. That is the strength of dignity. It can be suppressed for a time, but never erased. And in that ballroom, before everyone, the reversal wasn't just mine. It was a lesson for anyone who had ever forgotten to respect their own roots. After the photographer read the deed in my granddaughter's name aloud, the room never returned to what it had been. The atmosphere, once filled with laughter and toasts, now felt heavy, as if everyone suddenly realized they were witnessing something bigger than a birthday party. It was as if life had paused for a few minutes to deliver a public lesson. And that lesson wasn't just for Olivia or Mark, but for every single person there. I could hear the murmurs. People who had ignored me before now looked at me with respect. Some even offered silent gestures of apology, as if admitting they had been wrong to underestimate me. The contrast was striking. While my worth grew in everyone's eyes, Olivia and Mark shrank. The two who minutes earlier shone at the center were now surrounded by looks of judgment. It was as if the humiliation they had tried to impose on me had boomeranged back at them in a nearly poetic reversal. Olivia was pale, her eyes brimming with tears, searched for mine, but I held her gaze steady, calm. It wasn't a moment for anger, it was a moment for truth. She walked toward me, and in the thick silence whispered, "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I was selfish." Her words fell into the air like light rain after a storm. I heard them, but I didn't answer, immediately. Because I've learned over a lifetime that forgiveness cannot be asked for with words alone. Forgiveness is proven through actions, and in that moment, no matter how much emotion there was in Olivia's voice, I knew the wound wouldn't heal with a simple apology. Betrayal and humiliation don't disappear with quick words. Only with time and concrete change can respect be rebuilt. And here's a truth life teaches. Most apologies don't come at the height of someone's strength, but at the moment of their fall. Olivia hadn't apologized the day she treated me with indifference. She only did so when she saw, in front of everyone, that I was far more than she had tried to erase. That shows a hard truth about family. Some people only recognize your value when it's exposed in a way that cannot be denied. Painful, yes, but real. I didn't hug her right then. I simply looked into her eyes and said, "Forgiveness can't be rushed. Forgiveness is built." And I let those words hang in the air, not as rejection, but as a lesson. Because real forgiveness demands change, effort, action. That's a principle that applies to any relationship. If you wrong someone, don't try to fix it with sweet words alone. Show through daily actions that the mistake won't be repeated. That is how respect is rebuilt and dignity restored. Mark, for his part, kept his head down. He said nothing, maybe because he knew that for him, silence was the only way out. The man who had so often looked at me with arrogance now looked like a lost boy. That's life's irony. Those who try to humiliate us end up tasting the same bitterness themselves. In this case, revenge hadn't needed planning. It simply happened naturally in front of everyone, the inevitable consequence of truth revealed. And in that moment, I realized something even bigger. Olivia and Mark's downfall wasn't just social, it was symbolic. It was life showing that family isn't made of appearances, but of respect. That dignity isn't measured by expensive clothes or glamorous halls, but by actions. That true freedom comes when each of us recognizes our mistakes and chooses to start over differently. Olivia still had to prove whether she was capable of that. But as for me, it was already clear. I had done my part. As the party tried to regain some rhythm, I stood firm, head held high. not because I sought victory over my daughter, but because I knew I had delivered a lesson she would never forget. And perhaps that is the hardest role of a father, to show, even in the midst of pain, that respect is not a luxury. Respect is a right, and when it's denied, life always finds a way to return it double. When I walked out of that party, the cold night air hit my face like an unexpected embrace. I walked slowly toward my car, but inside I felt light, as if I had finally laid down a burden I had carried for years. I was no longer the father wounded by his daughter's betrayal, no longer the man scarred by public humiliation. I was free. Not because Olivia had asked for forgiveness, but because I understood that my dignity never depended on her recognition. My dignity had always been with me, in every choice, in every sacrifice, in every quiet gesture I built throughout my life. Olivia still tries to reach out to me, and maybe one day she'll manage to rebuild the bridge she broke. But I no longer wait for that, because true freedom comes when we stop chasing approval where it doesn't exist. Life showed me that revenge doesn't need to be cruel. It can simply be the reflection of truth, revealed at the right time. And for me, the future now rested in Lily, my granddaughter. She had become the symbol of continuity, the proof that all the effort, all the teaching, all the respect I planted could still bloom one day. And this is the great lesson I want to leave you. Respect is not a luxury, it is a right. If you don't learn that at home, life will teach it to you, sometimes painfully. Family. Relationships can be a stage for betrayal and humiliation, but they can also be a place for rebuilding and emotion. Dignity doesn't mean never falling. It means rising again with your head held high. That's what I did that night. I walked out without yelling, without forcing myself on anyone. I walked out with the serenity of someone who knows that life always reveals the truth. And now I want to ask you, how many times have you felt pushed aside within your own family? How many times have your dedication, your sacrifices, your values been treated as if they had no worth? The truth is, all of us, at some point, face moments of betrayal and humiliation that force us to choose. Will we stay silent, or will we turn that pain into freedom? Think about this. Dignity is not begged for on your knees. It is shown through actions. Respect is not something you plead for. It's earned through posture. And the wisest revenge is not in wounding those who wounded us, but in showing, with serenity, that nothing can erase the truth of a life lived with respect. So let me challenge you. What can you do today to show your family and yourself that you deserve to be treated with dignity? What decision do you need to make to step out of the shadows and take the center of your own story? If this reflection resonated with you, I invite you to leave your comment below. Share your experience, because your words might help someone going through the same pain. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here you'll always find stories that prove no one is ever too small when they carry respect and truth within them.